Some women don't crave love. They crave the feeling of almost having him, but never fully. She didn't want a man she could trust. She wanted a man she could never fully understand. Some women don't crave love. They crave the feeling of almost having him, but never fully. That breathless space between closeness and mystery, between knowing and guessing, between safety and risk, that's what keeps her heart racing. You've heard it 1,000 times. Women want security, stability, emotional intimacy. But what if that's only half the truth? What if, buried underneath that desire for safety, is a deeper hunger for the unknown, the untouchable? She didn't want a man she could trust. She wanted a man she could never fully understand. A man whose silence said more than words. A man whose presence made her question herself. The more stoic he was, the more obsessed she became. His distance wasn't a problem, it was the spark. He never yelled. He never lied. He never cheated. He just kept himself, slightly out of reach. And that drove her wild. She tried to decode him, to draw him out, to earn his vulnerability, like a prize. But the thing about stoic men is, they don't open easily. And the harder she tried, the deeper she fell into a space of emotional starvation masked as desire. Until one day, the chase was no longer enough. The silence stopped being mysterious. It became suffocating. She didn't cheat because he failed her. She cheated because she couldn't control him, and that made her need control somewhere else. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't even about the other man. It was about breaking something just to feel something. And when the stoic man finally let her in, when he broke the stillness and gave her what she thought she wanted, it was too late. Because the mystery was gone. And with it, the attraction. He wasn't distant because he didn't care. He was distant because he didn't need to explain. That was his power. While most men are busy proving they're safe, loyal, emotionally available, the stoic man simply watches. He listens. He reacts only when it matters. And somehow, that restraint is intoxicating. But let's get one thing straight. Stoic doesn't mean cold. It doesn't mean emotionally shut down or arrogant. Real stoicism, in its original sense, is about self-governance, the ability to stay grounded when the world is spinning. To respond instead of react. To choose peace over panic. But in dating, that trait gets twisted. In romance, stoicism becomes something else entirely, a paradox. To some women, it's a green flag. He's composed, stable, hard to shake. To others, it's a slow burn warning. He's closed off, hard to read, emotionally locked. And that confusion, that tension, that's where the obsession begins. You see, the average man thinks that being emotionally available is always the key. That if he communicates more, opens up faster, reassures constantly, he'll win her heart. And for many women, he will, but not her. Not the woman who's magnetized by silence. Not the woman who only feels alive when she's on the edge of being seen, but never fully held. She doesn't want instant access. She wants mystery. She doesn't want a man who tells her everything. She wants a man whose mind is a locked room. And every moment together feels like finding a new key. It's not about emotional health. It's about emotional gravity. Stoic men pull her in, not by force, but by stillness. He doesn't chase. He doesn't perform. He doesn't need her validation. And that, somehow, is what makes her crave his attention more than any flirty text or poetic confession ever could. But here's the trap. The same silence that draws her in is the silence that slowly starves her. The same mystery that makes him magnetic also makes him emotionally unavailable. The same strength that makes her feel safe can also make her feel invisible. So what is stoicism really in a romantic context? It's not about not feeling. It's about not leaking. It's not about indifference. It's about internal control. And that control, when misunderstood, becomes a double-edged sword. Because when he gives her nothing to read, no emotional signal, no crack in the armor, her mind fills in the blanks. At first with fantasy, later, with doubt. At first, she says, he's deep. Later, she whispers, he's gone. The stoic man often doesn't know this is happening. He thinks he's doing the right thing. He thinks his calm is comforting. But emotional containment, without emotional connection, isn't strength, it's solitude. And unless he finds a way to be present without unraveling, he'll remain the unsolvable puzzle she loved and left. Because even the most self-contained woman even the one drawn to the fire of mystery, eventually tires of burning alone. She says he's everything she ever wanted: calm, composed, emotionally stable. But late at night, when he rolls over without reaching for her, when he sits across the room and says nothing, when he listens but doesn't offer warmth, she begins to wonder, did she fall for his strength, or just get seduced by his silence? This is the paradox that keeps her stuck. The man who grounds her also makes her feel like she's floating alone. The man who never explodes also never melts. The man who never lies also never reveals. At first, it's magnetic. He doesn't try to impress. He doesn't overshare. He doesn't need to be chased. He walks into a room and owns it with stillness. He listens more than he speaks. He makes her work for his attention, and every drop of it feels earned. That's the hook. That's the high. But here's the crash. Once she's in, once she gives herself, she realizes the game never ends. He's still unavailable, still controlled, still untouchable. She thought she was special, but he never made her feel chosen. He made her feel tested. And eventually, that kind of attraction begins to rot from the inside. You see, not all desire comes from closeness. Sometimes it comes from tension, from confusion, from the silent challenge of winning someone who won't be won. And to a woman who equates love with pursuit, who finds validation in breaking walls, the Stoic man is irresistible until he becomes exhausting. Because there's only so long she can pour without being poured into. Only so long she can guess before she starts to resent the guessing. And yet, the paradox deepens. The moment he opens up, the spell breaks, the mystery fades, the thrill dissolves. She wanted the chase, not the finish line. She didn't fall in love with who he was. She fell in love with who he might be, if she could unlock him. And once he's unlocked, the fantasy dies. It's cruel. It's real. It's not that she's toxic or shallow. It's that the very traits that drew her in, distance, control, emotional opacity, are unsustainable for true intimacy. And yet, ironically, when he finally shows vulnerability, she starts to lose interest. Because she didn't want transparency. She wanted mystery. She didn't want access. She wanted the illusion of earning access. The Stoic man doesn't change, but her perception of him does. In the beginning, his lack of emotional display is power. Later, it's a wall. At first, it makes her feel safe. Later, it makes her feel alone. And the moment she realizes that no matter how much love she gives, he'll never fully let her in, that's the moment she starts looking for cracks elsewhere. Not because she wants someone else, but because she wants to feel seen. And sometimes, it's easier to be seen by a stranger than to wait for a man who hides behind calm like a fortress. The paradox is brutal. She's drawn to what breaks her, attracted to what keeps her uncertain. And yet if he ever gives her certainty, the attraction slips away. That's the curse of the emotionally elusive man. And that's why so many women don't leave out of hate, but out of hunger. She tells herself she's strong, independent, emotionally mature, but something about him disarms all of that. He doesn't chase, he doesn't reassure, he doesn't bend, and somehow, that stillness scrapes at the inside of her brain like an unsolved riddle. What's going on here isn't just romance, it's psychology. This isn't about logic, it's about wiring, deep, primal, subconscious patterning. Let's start with the first trigger, attachment style. If she's anxious, even just subtly, she craves closeness, clarity, consistency. But when she meets an avoidant man, a man who values space, control, and minimal emotional exposure, something inside her flares. It's not just attraction, it's activation. Her nervous system lights up like it's chasing survival. She feels the pull not because he's safe, but because he's just out of reach. And that distance mimics something familiar, a childhood dynamic, a lost father figure, a feeling she never quite resolved. The second trigger? The illusion of control. In life, she may dominate, she leads, she decides, she commands. But with him, she has no script, no leverage, no emotional handle, and that lack of control becomes its own kind of addiction. If she can get this man to open up, to fall, to soften, it'll mean she's really enough. He becomes a project, not a partner. The third trigger is dopamine, the chemical of craving, not satisfaction. The human brain releases more dopamine when a reward is inconsistent. Just like slot machines. Just like unpredictable affection. When he's cold, she spirals. When he gives her a little warmth, a glance, a compliment, a moment of softness, she lights up. And that hit feels better than steady love ever did. She's not addicted to him. She's addicted to the possibility of him. To the gaps. To the maybes. To the version of him that lives more in her fantasy than in his behavior. Then there's the fourth layer, the narrative loop. The belief that if she can earn love from someone who resists it, she'll prove something to herself. That she's lovable. That she's special. That she can crack what others couldn't. It's not about connection. It's about conquest. But here's the contradiction. Even if she wins, she often loses. Because the fantasy is more powerful than the reality. The moment he becomes fully available, if he ever does, the chemical high crashes. He's no longer the mystery. He's just a man. And if she never learned to love men who are emotionally open, that moment of closeness feels foreign, uncomfortable, even boring. Her entire system was tuned to the pursuit, not the presence. And so, subconsciously, she begins to sabotage, not because she's cruel, not because she wants drama, but because the reward center in her brain doesn't know how to handle emotional peace. It only knows how to chase danger disguised as depth. And that's why the Stoic man, the one who offers nothing unless he chooses to, becomes the most addictive and the most dangerous. He awakens all the ghosts she thought she buried. And if she doesn't know her own emotional blueprint, she'll mistake that anxiety for love. She'll say, "This feels intense." But intensity isn't intimacy. It's just the echo of unresolved longing dressed up as passion. And unless someone breaks that loop, he or she, the story always ends the same. One partner emotionally starving, the other emotionally unaware, and both wondering how something that felt so powerful became so empty. Lily wasn't the only one. There's Sarah, mid-30s, intelligent, self-aware, emotionally literate. She dated a man for 2 years who barely raised his voice. Never broke down. Never acted jealous. On paper, perfect. In real life, exhausting. She said, "I felt like I was dating a statue. A beautiful, well-dressed statue. And for some reason, that made me want him more." She tried everything, emotional check-ins, vulnerability, soft invitations to share. Nothing worked. So one night, out of nothing but emotional fatigue, she slept with someone else. Not out of lust, not even desire, but just to feel something bounce back at her. It wasn't about betrayal, it was about aliveness. Then there's Tara, opposite case. She dated someone who was expressive, overly present, constantly texting, always available. It overwhelmed her. "I didn't feel desire. I felt suffocated," she said. So when she met a man who didn't instantly offer himself, who had walls, silence, restraint, she was drawn in like a flame. She called it mystery, but admitted later it was emotional confusion dressed as attraction. These women aren't rare. They're everywhere. They're not unstable. They're not broken. They're simply trapped in a pattern, mistaking absence for depth, mistaking challenge for value, mistaking stoicism for substance. And it's not just real-life stories. It's written into the culture. Think Mr. Darcy from Pride and Prejudice, cold, unreadable, emotionally repressed, until he finally reveals love, and suddenly becomes the dream. Or Don Draper from Mad Men, stoic, silent, tortured, emotionally detached, yet irresistible. Then there's Joe from You, toxic, yes, but dangerously calm and composed. Women aren't drawn to toxicity. They're drawn to the illusion of control within emotional chaos. Even in Disney, think Beast from Beauty and the Beast, emotionally volatile, mysterious, unreachable, until she changes him. The pattern is clear. Woman meets closed-off man, right-pointing arrow becomes obsessed with unlocking him, right-pointing arrow finds identity in being the one who reaches him. Right-pointing arrow ends up disoriented when the fantasy doesn't match the reality. The deeper twist? Many of these men never promised anything. They didn't manipulate. They didn't chase. They simply existed in their stillness, and that stillness became the blank canvas for projection. The women saw what they wanted to see: depth, power, trauma, potential. Sometimes it was real, often it wasn't. And that's the tragedy. When the man finally speaks, finally opens up, finally lets her in, she doesn't feel triumph. She feels disappointment, Because she wasn't in love with him. She was in love with the idea of reaching him. With the story. With the struggle. Real stories like Lily's, Sarah's, Tara's. They're not about bad men or reckless women. They're about how emotional chemistry can be built not on connection, but on confusion, not on resonance, but on resistance. And unless someone breaks the projection, the cycle always repeats. She gets tired of chasing silence. And he wonders why women always leave right when he starts to trust. At first, his silence was powerful. His stillness felt like wisdom. His lack of emotional reaction made him seem unshakable. But over time, what once felt like safety started to feel like absence. The same traits that made her fall for him slowly began to push her away. This is when Stoicism turns from strength to sabotage. He thinks he's being composed, but she feels ignored. He believes he's being calm, but she feels emotionally starved. He calls it self-control, she experiences it as emptiness. That's the twist. The Stoic man rarely sees the damage until it's already done. Because he's not doing anything wrong. And that's exactly the problem. He's not doing anything at all. When she cries, he listens, but says nothing. When she's vulnerable, he nods, but doesn't open back. When she needs reassurance, he offers logic, not comfort. And slowly, she stops sharing, not because she doesn't care, but because she doesn't want to feel alone while speaking. His presence is physical, but emotionally, she feels like she's talking into a void. And that void becomes heavy. Resentment begins to creep in. Quietly, subtly, she starts to fantasize, not necessarily about other men, but about someone who looks her in the eyes and really sees her. Someone who feels with her, not just beside her. She never asked for drama. She just wanted depth, and when she doesn't get it, she either shrinks or strays. Some women withdraw, go numb, others test, push harder, start fights just to provoke a reaction. And some, not all, but some, cheat, not for lust, not for love, but for proof that they still matter, that they can still be felt. And the Stoic man, blind to all of this, is blindsided. I never lied, I never yelled, I never betrayed her. And he's right, he was loyal, in action, but not always present, in emotion. His armor protected him, but it kept her out. He didn't realize that silence can scream just as loud as words. That doing nothing, in the emotional world, is still a choice. A loud one. That's when Stoicism backfires, when his strength becomes stone, when his peace becomes punishment, when she no longer feels hurt, she feels invisible. And that feeling, over time, breaks more hearts than any argument ever could. The most dangerous lie Stoic men believe is this: if I stay strong, she'll stay. But strength without softness isn't power, it's distance. And distance, over time, erodes intimacy. The truth is, she doesn't need you to break down. She doesn't need long speeches or daily emotional downloads. She just needs to feel like her emotions land somewhere. That behind your composure, there's someone present, someone human. The balance isn't about talking more. It's about signaling warmth without surrendering stability. You can be stoic and still emotionally available. You can be mysterious and still connected. The key is strategic vulnerability. Not dumping your feelings, not oversharing, just letting her know, in small, deliberate moments, that you have a heart. Even if it's quiet. A simple, I heard you, when she's upset. A glance that lingers a second longer when she's unsure. A calm, steady hand that reaches for hers, not out of desperation, but out of grounding. These things matter. They say, I'm here, I see you, I may not fall apart, but I feel what matters. Most Stoic men assume any emotional openness equals weakness. But true emotional power is the ability to let someone in without losing yourself. It's about offering access, not total exposure. It's not giving her your soul. It's letting her feel she's not completely shut out. The second key is unpredictability with intent. If you're always unreadable, she becomes anxious. If you're always expressive, she loses interest. But if you occasionally break your pattern, if you suddenly show affection after days of calm, or reveal a personal story out of nowhere, it creates electricity. She'll lean in, not because she's confused, but because she feels honored. She didn't demand it, you chose to share. That choice builds trust, not control. The third piece? Presence without pressure. You don't need to fix her emotions. Just hold them. You don't need to respond instantly. But when you do respond, let it be real. Let her know that beneath the still water, something lives, that you're not cold, you're composed, and that your silence isn't emptiness, it's intention. She can handle your mystery, but not if it makes her feel invisible. She doesn't need you to fall apart. She just needs to know that behind the armor, there's still skin, still breath, still you. That's the balance. You remain stoic, grounded, strong, unmoved by chaos, but you allow enough light in that she doesn't have to guess if she matters. Because if she has to guess for too long, she'll stop playing. Not because she stopped loving you, but because she got tired of loving alone. She didn't fall for him because he gave her everything. She fell because he gave her just enough to stay hungry. And that hunger, that emotional craving dressed up as passion, is what so many mistake for love. But let's be clear, this isn't about blaming her for chasing a ghost. And it's not about blaming him for being hard to reach. It's about recognizing the trap. A beautiful, dangerous trap. The unattainable man, the stoic, composed, emotionally distant man, isn't always manipulative. Sometimes, he's simply untrained. No one taught him how to hold space for emotion, how to feel without fixing, how to be strong and soft at the same time. And she, the emotionally attuned, connection-hungry, often self-aware woman, may not be weak or naive. She may just be stuck in a pattern she hasn't yet named. So here's the real value. If you recognize yourself in this story, on either side, it's not too late. If you're the man, strength without connection isn't masculinity. It's fear in armor. Let someone see you, not all the time. Not all at once, but enough to be real. Realness builds respect. Presence builds polarity. And if you're the woman, you don't have to earn someone's depth. Love shouldn't feel like a test you can fail. You're not crazy for craving connection. But if you're constantly explaining your needs and still being met with silence, it's not stoicism. It's emotional absence. And no, you don't need to fix it. You need to see it. The world tells men to suppress and women to chase. But intimacy isn't built in silence. And attraction isn't maintained by confusion. It's built when mystery meets meaning. When presence meets power. When desire isn't used to control, but to connect. So maybe it's time to stop romanticizing emotional unavailability. Maybe it's time to stop calling detachment masculine. Maybe the most attractive man isn't the one who never breaks, but the one who chooses when and where to open. With strength, precision, and truth. Because a man who can lead with depth, but still stay grounded, he's not just stoic. He's unforgettable.